Good morning and welcome to Business Reporter's Best of British Business campaign. I'm Rachel Hicks. For a lot of British businesses, the recent debates about communications and security infrastructure are going to mean an overhaul of their building security systems. That is going to be a costly exercise for those who have to rebuild their systems from scratch in order to integrate technology from new vendors. We've invited the CEO of a British company that has pioneered ways to avoid such integration costs in the future. What does it take to build a flexible, reliable building security system? And what opportunities do current trends offer to British manufacturers? That's what we're going to learn from Richard Lambert at Evolution Security. Richard, welcome.
Good morning, Rachel.
Now, we expect our buildings to be secure and building owners to take expert security advice. So why do some buildings fall short in this area?
Well, very often the threats and the vulnerabilities aren't correctly identified. It's important that they are identified so that it can move forward to identifying the right solution. It's like anything in this world, if you don't actually know the problem, you're not going to find the solution.
So what does a good building security system look like? What are the main requirements?
Compliance-wise, it needs to be legally compliant. It needs to meet what the client wants, obviously, and it needs to have a good life cycle, be able to be supportable. It's not the case where we can just go and see the latest shiny product on the shelf and say, that will do for me. There's a much earlier stage of thinking in the process of getting the security system designed.
So what are the potential consequences if the requirements aren't met?
Quite simply, the client's going to waste their money, and secondly, run the risk of real brand damage. If systems don't work for the building, if they don't provide what they're supposed to be provided for, then word will get out, the brand will be damaged, and it's a seriously costly mistake.
So one would have thought with the modern technology available, creating a security system should be easier, not harder. So is this a technology issue or a process issue?
Well, I think both of those things are major components, if you like, of the solution. But none of those can be applied until you actually understand what the client's issues are. Without understanding those, early stage, it is impossible to then select the right product. Product is very important, technology is important, and the source of those products is important. But so is process. But without that first stage of really getting under the skin and understanding where the client's threats are, where their risks are, then we know further forward, nobody can be expected to fully provide a solution that works.
So what is the solution? How do we minimise risk?
Well, you've got to ask the experts, and you've got to ask them early. And we found this throughout my career. We've found that we've not been brought in early enough to the conversation with the client. If you imagine you're building a house, you wouldn't start building a house without having spoken to the architect, employed an architect, so they can understand what you want. If the supplier doesn't understand what the client wants, they can't provide the solution. You've got to be in there early.
So how do you at Evolution Security achieve this integration? What's your process?
Well, we've got a 6-step process. It really starts with that discussion with the client. It's understanding where they see their risk, what their risk profile is really, their vulnerabilities, and understanding what their roadmap is. You know, what's their future? Are they going to be building lots of buildings? Is this just a one building that's not going to expand? Is it multiple sited, for example? So there are those things that we need to understand as the first step. Once we've done that, we can then write an operational requirement, which then is designed to go forward to a specification once agreed by the client. Without the OR, the operational requirement, it's really impossible to get to an accurate specification that both parties understand. So step 3 is the specification. The specification will then be designed based on the operational requirement, but to take into account either mitigating or at least reducing considerably the risk to the client by putting that product in. Once agreed, then the specification is developed into a proposal. We install, maintain, provide the ongoing service and keep the system running with the client for the life cycle of the system.
Security is a heavy technological-based industry at the moment. How does UK manufacturing fare in that?
UK manufacturing is becoming more and more important for the integrity and the trust in where that product it comes from and where it's produced. We've seen over the last few years industrial espionage. We've seen privacy laws breached by Far Eastern, Chinese, Russian product companies. For our security infrastructure, we need to be able to trust 100% where those products come from. Now, UK manufacturers are stepping up. We're working with a few manufacturers at the moment who are drilling right down into base component product so that they can be sure they haven't got Chinese chips in those CCTV cameras, for example. Because without doing that, there can be no 100% guarantee that we're providing an integrity, a product with that integrity.
So in that case, how do you see this sector developing over the next, say, 10 years or so?
I think there's going to be an increased buying local, largely because of the integrity of the product, as I've mentioned before. I think we need to know where products come from. But the other side of that is we also need to know that we can support those products for the foreseeable future. Buying products from unknown areas, for example, because on cost, is not going to necessarily isn't the right solution, because we can't guarantee that's going to be available next year. I think there's very much an increase in the technology requirement for sites and a recognition that technology is a key part of the solution. We know that there are issues with personnel on site potentially, and we've experienced that with the pandemic. If you lose all of the access to your personnel on site, people coming onto site, the reliance on technology is far more significant. And finally, single source. It's sourcing from a security expert that listens, learns, and understands what the client wants so that we can create adaptable, capable, and systems that will work through the lifetime of the client's requirements and through their changing threat environment.
Richard, thank you so much for coming in and sharing all of that with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.